Hello and welcome to the Niagara Podcast. I am your co-host, Eric Larson with Intelligent Buildings, and today I am joined by Alex Grace of Clockworks Analytics.
Great to be here.
All
Thanks,
right.
Eric.
Good to have you here. So it's Alex's first time here at the Niagara Summit. We're kind of looking out on a lot of booths and excitement as day 2 comes to a close. Alex, how's it been so far?
It's been great. First time here, love it. Ton of traffic, a lot of good conversations.
Awesome. Yeah, I think that's the consensus so far. So being that it's your first time, how did you get into this space? How did you get into Clockworks? What's your background?
Sure. So I've been with Clockworks 9 years now.
Wow.
And in the area of fault detection and diagnostics for, I guess, 13 years, which is my whole career in this weird little niche of analyzing data from buildings.
That's like as long as FDD has been around, period, right?
Pretty much, yep. Especially, in line with being able to get data to the cloud. And I really got lucky, stumbled into it early on, got connected to Clockworks because our founders were in PhDs in building science at MIT. I had a friend in a similar program, saw what these guys were doing, and jumped aboard.
Very cool. So what were you doing at the time?
I was with another company that was pretty early on this fault detection and diagnostics train. Had actually raised a ton of money and lit it a match and burned it all up, so it was a great learning experience. And then found this small group of PhDs at MIT doing some really incredible things. We had 60 buildings on the platform around that time, I believe, and about 2,400 today. 400 million square feet later, so It's been a good ride.
Yeah. No, FDD is something that comes up a lot in discussions kind of around the Niagara community when it comes to buildings in general, and I wanted to ask Alex a little bit about kind of how it works and also how it integrates with Niagara. So maybe some background on that.
Sure, yeah. So just foundationally, a lot of different ways to connect. Our approach is software only, so no hardware. It's a Windows service. A software gateway gets dropped on the network. It can be on a workstation, a PC, a dedicated VM. And that service is we're in great shape when we have the opportunity to talk to Niagara. It's always super easy. So Haystack API is increasingly common. We also do OBIX, BACnet, but Haystack API is the main one.
Okay.
And then out there talking to different systems over those different protocols. And that software gateway reads data every 5 minutes and does a one-way outbound only push to the cloud. Okay,
so data is pushed to the cloud. Yep. Integrates with the Niagara system, and the FDD part, the fault detection diagnostics, is running analytics in the cloud. You can see my brow furrowing. I'm asking for clarification here, but runs the rules in the cloud to diagnose the issues and report them back to the Niagara users.
That's exactly right. Okay. And whether those users are building owners or whether they're integrators that are providing a service to their clients, what makes Clockworks unique is that we have this global information model, and what that means is that we have a global standardized way of modeling building equipment and systems. That sequence of operations, that's mechanical parameters like horsepower, rated flows, as well as the core point information. So when we run diagnostics against those models, we can do that at scale, meaning one central code set that is running across the entire customer base, as opposed to writing code on a one-off basis for this building or this client. And that means that when we release new things, everyone gets it immediately in a software as a service application. It also means that new buildings that come online have directly benefit from all the 400 million square feet that came before.
Nice. And that's spread out across different asset classes?
Yes, pretty across the board. Whether it's healthcare, municipal, we do a lot in universities. Okay. And increasing amount of work in the partner community, integrator partners that are looking to offer a differentiated service to the market.
Okay, so I want to touch on the partners.
Yeah.
But first, so you're talking about the deployment. There's plenty of buzzwords we could talk about with big data or artificial intelligence, machine learning, you name it. So what is the benefit of Clockworks having this large system of data to share back to users?
Sure. Good question. So, a couple key things. One, just having 400 million square feet, over 2 million data points in a system that have been all standardized into not just tagging, but concatenations of tags, which are called point types. Importance of that is that we have a pretty large data set that's already been mapped to a standard model, which means that when new data sets come in, we actually do run machine learning on those data sets to be able to probabilistically determine what that data is. So meaning, is it a supply air temperature? Is it a set point? Is it a Boolean? What exactly is it? Is it a mode of operation? So the ability to ingest points and understand what they are is the primary application that we see for machine learning, and that's a neural net based approach to understand what is this data.
Okay. So the machine that's learning is the analytics platform itself, and it's learning from aggregating lots and lots and lots of data across this portfolio, and on top of it, the data that it's absorbing is able to be read and categorized, and the other term you used that I can't remember, based on using naming and tagging conventions like Haystack. Is that all accurate?
Yes, so we have our own point typing category. Our CEO actually just became the new co-executive director of Project Haystack.
Nice.
We're also involved in BRIC and some of the other communities out there. So really looking to help bring those worlds together around this whole ontology conversation. And then the actual core diagnostics itself are what's called an expert system. So it's a type of AI that's not super well understood, I think, in our industry.
Okay.
And we've got a really interesting deep dive blog post on that called Do You Do AI? And because we get that question all the time. And there tends to be, let's say, some confusion on the topic, right, about what that really is.
Yeah.
So we dive into that there.
Okay. Now, is the output for the system that you're talking about there's 3 categories, I believe. Could you go a little bit more on those? Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, sure. So sort of how we categorize our findings. So diagnostics rules are never running on a one-off basis. They're always structured into a hierarchy, and that's that expert system-based approach that rules are aware of each other. So why does that matter? It means less false positives and being able to get to the root cause of the problem.
Okay.
So rather than a laundry list of rule results which look like faults, which look like alarms, and an engineer has to string all that together, we pull that into a hierarchy, work to get to the root cause of the problem, and then prioritize those results. And those results are prioritized on those 3 categories you just mentioned, which is energy, comfort, and maintenance.
That's right. Okay.
And those are 3 things we think are important. On the energy side, fully robust engineering calculations, nothing black box, all standard engineering. But you need to string all this stuff together to really truly quantify excess kBTUs and excess kWh in a way that follows proper measurement verification protocols. And then on the comfort and maintenance side, that's super important as well, which is comfort, what's going to keep the phone from ringing, what's going to prevent complaints from occupants. Indoor air quality, of course, is tied in there today very heavily. And then maintenance, the mechanical severity of the problem. Can you pick up a damper that's starting a short cycle before that actuator needs to be replaced? Can you pick up on, that fan belt issue that's leading to abnormal fan currents before that belt totally slips and breaks, etc. So there's a predictive maintenance component there that's important as well.
Yeah, the shift from kind of the typical service contract model where you're, going down a checklist and checking things off versus using some form of analytics to inform those decisions of what you should do on site, more of a predictive maintenance approach, I think is really going to transform the industry, because it's not just the building systems, it's really about how they're operated and who's operating them. And I think that's where Clockworks adds a lot of value.
Yeah, absolutely. In this community, these partner discussions are just super exciting, because we have a lot of discussions to say, analytics as a category excuse me, has been thought about for a long time as people trying to sell analytics. So we have people coming up and having discussions to say, well, we're having trouble selling analytics. And the response is really, well, stop selling analytics. Why are you trying to sell analytics? Really what we should be doing is selling outcomes and impact based on the services that we're providing. And Clockworks is a way to power that. So what we're really talking about is Clockworks as an enterprise software platform to power service delivery, as opposed to trying to sell it as a one-off product. And because of Clockworks' approach, where you could have dozens, hundreds of customers and all their buildings together on one dashboard and have that all consolidated, that really changes what you're able to do. So as a larger integrator, for example, you might start benchmarking your clients. You might start telling them that, hey, your systems are performing at the 10% level. Here's what we can do to help you fix that, compared to the rest of our customer base. So you unlock a lot of data value, at this enterprise level.
Yeah.
That's super interesting. And yeah, some really cool partners that are doing that.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and so there's kind of two tracks to your approach. And one track would be you could sell to owners directly to have this portfolio approach.
Right.
You're saying this other track is that you could sell to an integrator or partner with them in order to allow them to have this different approach to the way they operate the buildings where they have service contracts and that kind of thing. Is that right?
That's exactly right.
Okay.
And basically where I could see that divide is really when you have a really robust facilities team at a university, at a hospital, at a large campus environment, you know, they're going to want to get their hands on those analytics and work with them themselves because they're probably self-performing quite a bit. That doesn't mean there isn't a role for the contractor there. There is. But then that's sort of the enterprise side. Then there's the service transformation side, saying how does fault detection and diagnostics transform how you do services? And really what that means, never roll a truck to a customer site again not knowing where the problems are ahead of time. You know, if you think about how service typically has been done for the last 30 years, truck rolls, we don't know what we're going to find until we show up. Maybe we have the right part, maybe we don't. You know, afterwards, did the technician fix it right or not? You know, maybe he's a junior guy and he's new, and you know, how do you validate that? So what we hear a lot from integrators is one of our biggest challenges is training, right? I mean, we hear about hiring new people. It's really difficult to find good people.
It is.
So there's a role for technology to play there in not only helping direct to the root cause of the problem to save time troubleshooting. So we have partners that tell us our guys are getting 4 times as much done on site by having the insights Clockworks provides as opposed to going in blind. And then there's the validation after to say, well, how do I know it got done right? And if it didn't, that's a training opportunity in itself.
Yeah. Yeah, it seems like a challenge would be kind of gaining or getting into the mindset of using this to inform your work as opposed to kind of the reactive method. The other challenge that I could see if you're listening to this and you're not really, you know, bought into this mindset, or if your customers aren't, but to be able to get that data that's coming out of the BMS right now, we're going into Clockworks, that actually is accurate to this part is broken, it's in this room, in this building. Yeah. Is that pretty challenging too? What would you say to someone who's kind of like coming into this for the first time?
Yeah, no, it's really totally possible, and it's a question of, you know, there's a leap there for sure. It's really, I think the leap is more business model at this point, at least it relates to this community, because it's a question of, you know, obviously there's added cost to build a program like this into your contract. And really, there's a tremendous amount of value associated with doing that in terms of reporting on what you're able to provide. So at the end of the year, what did your service agreement do for your client? You know, well, we checked a bunch of boxes and we did best practices. But now you're in a position to say, well, actually, we brought your building from a maintenance level of here to there. We saved this many dollars. And here was the impact we had on building occupants in terms of comfort, in terms of indoor air quality. So that's now automated, that whole reporting process. Okay. And that also drives pull-through, right? So from a business model perspective, you got a guy on site once a quarter, once a month. Now you're able to drive new work. So when he shows up on site, not only does he know where the problems are, but he's able to, now you have a situation where you're able to say, all right, what's in contract that we're going to fix? Yeah. And what's not in our contract that we're going to propose? And essentially upsell for very good reason, because the problems need to be addressed. So, yeah, you know, there's a walk, you know, run there. Yeah. And really the run part of it is dedicating a resource internally. So if you think about like the best technician that an integrator might have, you know, and he's on the most complicated jobs in the field. And we've actually seen some partners say, we're going to take a really good engineer, put him in the office, and make sure that they're able to now provide one-to-many value by now centralizing that person to use Clockworks and really have conversations on the findings with every technician before they go out into the field. So now that's how that sort of transformation to say we're actually able to get 4 times as much done is happening.
Interesting. Yeah, there's so many applications. It's interesting to talk about. But one thing you mentioned that I wanted to point out is that although analytics will typically show and find energy savings, you shouldn't necessarily be selling analytics on just energy savings. That can get dangerous. It's really about this whole change in mindset, right?
Definitely. Definitely. I mean, if you think about how much costs are involved in labor and in the actual equipment, you know, capital planning, et cetera, So there's many other parts of the pie there besides energy for sure. And predictive maintenance is, if you can find problems before you've got a big headache on your hands, usually it just takes that one time where it's like, oh wow, if we didn't know about this, my Saturday would have been,
That'll help change the mindset.
That helps.
Yeah, you take away people's weekends and they get up in arms. No, so lot of interesting stuff here. I guess looking forward, is there anything on the roadmap you'd like to talk about? Any good success stories that you have that you could share? What's next for Alex and Clockworks?
Sure, yeah. There's been a lot of great things that just come out publicly. We just had a case study with MathWorks, which is an interesting organization that published a great case study on the work with Clockworks there. Also, one of our clients, Merck, a pretty large pharmaceutical company, they just publicly announced an award that they won, the Manufacturing Leadership Award, which is pretty cool for their use of Clockworks in driving a predictive maintenance program. And that's expanding across their portfolio. So the kind of things you can't talk about until there's a public award, and then you can say something. So that's great.
So now, what did they see through the program? What's the outcomes that they're kind of promoting here?
Yeah, so they're promoting and talking about avoided costs. That's not just on the energy side. That's of course a part of it. They've got sustainability goals, carbon reduction. That's important. But the predictive maintenance piece, particularly for a really complex environment like a pharmaceutical laboratory environment or a manufacturing environment, the avoided costs are more significant even on equipment downtime and the implications of that. So risk and reliability would be the realm there, which is really around, what is the risk and how do you reduce risk in your process? So some cool things there for sure.
Yeah, risk, I've talked about that with some others today, but risk reduction is really important to the real estate owners. It's something it's hard to quantify, but it's something that's so important to their business and their business continuity and that kind of thing. So I'm sure Merck was very interested in that as well. Now, did they have facilities management? Did they have facilities management in-house, or were they outsourcing, or was it kind of all over the place?
They've got some different models in different places in terms of vendors, but they've got certainly different ones there.
Very cool.
Yeah, and then you asked about roadmap. So what's coming? All kinds of things. Yeah. It's constantly evolving. It's a fun thing about software as a service. You release new stuff on a continuous cycle. So lots on the roadmap. We're having a lot of clients that really want us to do more analysis on meter data. So that we think about that as a top-down perspective. So there's the bottom-up analytics, which is the fault detection, saying, hey, this valve's leaking, that damper's stuck, this loop is underloaded, those chillers could be staged more efficiently, this economizer sequence is out of whack, the equipment level problems that are happening in every building and prioritizing them. But then there's the top-down, which is, hey, this building's using more energy than it should be. That sort of overall energy management view. And what I think is really exciting is being able to connect those two things. Because the question comes up and you say, okay, the building's using more energy than it should be. Well, now what? What do I do with that? Do I bring in an engineering firm? Do I do a retrocommissioning study? What do I do? So if you can say in 2 clicks, well, here's why the building is using more than it should be. Drill into these 5 pieces of equipment are your main problem children, and here are the problems on them, and that's what's throwing off the global metric. There's some interesting things there. Yeah.
Well, right, with the addition of more data at the meter level in addition to the BMS, whatever other systems you guys can soak up, there's a lot of cool things happening, and software across industries just about, the results it can provide, the way it can change your business, and it's all pretty interesting.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Well, I think that's all the questions I have today. I'm excited to do this again in another year, hear more about those updates, and Alex, thanks for your time.
Thanks for talking.
And the listeners, thank you as well.
Thanks.